Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Expat Conversations with Michael Nolen. I want to say thank you very much for tuning in today. Once again, if you're not familiar with the show, we are an extension of the University of Guadalajara Institute of Innovation, Investigation, and Governance. And what all that means is we're basically trying to get information out to people from the university and through other sources to try and help educate. That's what universities do down here in Mexico. First of all, I want to say thank you very much to Dr. Marco Antonio Cortez Gradado, who is the director of the University Institute and allows us to have this program. Also want to say thank you very much to the Monte Carlo Hotel and Resort here in Chapala, Mexico. We're right on the north side of Lake Chapala. If you're coming down to Lake Chapala area to either look about buying a house or staying down here for 2 or 3 months or just coming for a week of vacation, the Monte Carlo is a really, really great place. It's very centrally located and it's just fabulous. They have pickleball courts, they have really nice swimming pools, they have really nice thermal hot water mineral baths that you can take, and it's really relaxing, really refreshing. A really nice restaurant, very nice rooms, all the amenities that a resort would have. So if you're coming down, if you're a snowbird and you want somewhere to stay for 2 or 3 months, they have villas that you can rent with small kitchenettes. So keep in mind the Villa Monte Carlo Resort and Hotel here on the west side of Wahihi. Well, now we're going to start the show, and I'm very fortunate to have a good friend of mine and my tax accountant, Patrick Odum.
Correct.
Am I saying that
Yes, that's correct.
Patrick, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Patrick runs Lakeside Tax Services.
Correct.
And I'm going to be quiet for a little bit and just let Patrick give you a little bio of himself. When you come down here, there's a lot of changes in taxes than what you're probably used to in the United States and maybe Canada. So I'm going to let Patrick tell you all the different things that he runs into with the expats and help educate you a little bit, okay? So Patrick, thank you very much. I'm going to open it up to you.
Well, thank you for having me today. So I've lived here in Mexico for 16 years, and 12 years ago, I started a business called Lakeside Tax Service. And over the years, we've expanded. We now have 5 administrators, and we have 2 tax preparers. We work year-round. We're a year-round tax service. And we specialize in doing taxes for U.S. citizens who have foreign income or who have foreign issues related to their tax return. And we also prepare taxes for Mexicans who may have income in the U.S. and therefore have a filing obligation in the U.S.
I didn't realize that, and that's very important to know.
Yes, yes.
Because I've got a lot of friends that live in the United States, but they're Mexicans, and they come back and forth. They're kind of like snowbirds. And this will be great information. I know, too, I can tell right away about that.
Yes, and what's happening these days is many people realize that the real estate market in the U.S. is a good place to invest. And so Mexicans are now investing into the U.S. market, and now with an asset in the U.S. that generates income, they have to file a U.S. tax return.
Let me ask you one other question. Do you do anything with Canadians, with the Canadian government?
Yes, we do. We do certain Canadian. Right now, we don't have a Canadian tax preparer, but we do intake so that we bring the client in, we scan the papers, we send that to a person in Canada, and then she prepares the tax return. She is a person who's lived here at Lakeside, so she's very familiar with the area, and she's also familiar with the foreign issues that Canadians face, which are distinct issues from those of U.S. citizens. But she does those tax returns, and then we give them to the client and let the client pay us here so that they don't have to send their documents physically to Canada.
Okay, you are a CPA, a certified public accountant, correct?
I'm an annual filing season participant with the IRS.
Okay.
And I'm also a certified acceptance agent with the IRS, which simply means that I can verify original documents when a person needs an I-10 number, which we'll discuss a little bit later.
Well, and yes, we will discuss that because he helped me file an I-10 for my wife.
Yes.
She had one for many years, and then when our current president of the United States took office, he decided he was going to redo them all. So we had to go through that, and I actually tried 4 or 5 times and failed getting it correct. I kept getting letters saying it's not accepted, but it wouldn't say why it wasn't accepted. But anyway, so I talked to Patrick. He said, "Oh, I'm one of the 3 certified people in all of Mexico that can do that."
Right.
And next thing I know, it was corrected, and everything's great. So, and what does that mean? That means I can claim my wife, who is a Mexican citizen, on my tax return. And so instead of married filing separate, it's married filing joint.
That's correct.
And that's a little bit better with the dollars
Yes.
that I have to give back to them.
Definitely.
So that's one thing we'll talk about a little bit more. So what else do you want people to know that you do? It's coming, this is being filmed in early October, or actually mid-September, but we're going to air it early October. We're coming close to the end of the year, the 4th quarter.
Right.
And I know from my experience and others, there's a lot of important things you need to try and do before the end, December 31st, correct?
There are some certain things that you should do, and one of those is reviewing your bank account. If you have a foreign bank account, you may be subject to the FBAR. It's actually the FineSend 114 report, but it's the report that U.S. citizens are required to file to report bank accounts that have gone over $10,000 during the course of the year. And so those bank accounts are reportable to the U.S., and that's another service that we offer in addition to tax return preparation. Many people come to us and they want us to do only that report, and that's okay.
Now, is that a collective, like 4,000, 3,000, 3,000, 1,000, or is it 10,000 in one lump sum in the year?
That's a good point. It would be the sum of all of your foreign accounts.
Wow.
So if you have 3 accounts and each account has 4,000 in it, then you would need to report those accounts. You would also have to report any other account, even if it had a small amount. Once you're subject to reporting, all foreign accounts are subject to that reporting.
I know a lot of expats come down here and just rent, but a lot of us buy homes. And normally what happens is you take a home, or you have finances in the United States, and you have to have it transported or moved to a Mexican bank, depending on the real estate company and how the transaction is going. So a lot of expats have to move large sums of money like I did.
Correct.
Now my large sum to me is not nothing compared to some people's large sums, but it was enough money that it put me way over that year. I had to pay money on that taxes, on that money, because I took it out of my 401k.
Right.
And then also it was just there for several days until I guess I transformed it from my bank to Mellon Bank in New York, and then Mellon took it to the real estate company that had an office in New York, and then they brought it to their company here, and then they gave it to the man I bought the home from.
Okay.
It was kind of like around the ballpark home run.
Right.
But it took quite a few steps, and I'm sure there's a lot of different ways that happens when gringos or expats buy houses down here.
Right.
And do you get involved in that a little bit?
Only to the point where they may have their account went over $10,000.
Okay.
And one thing I want to mention, because a lot of people have anxiety over this report, because there's a lot of money to be made in scaring people into doing certain things. So we don't try to scare you. We try to keep you in compliance with the U.S. tax laws. And part of that is reporting accounts that go over $10,000 in the year. But let's say you bring down money, and then after that year, your account here in Mexico or other foreign countries never surpasses $10,000. You're no longer subject to that report. So it's only in the years that your balance would pass $10,000.
Okay. That's great information to know.
But let me mention something that came up, and this is something, a money-saving tip, because once you move out of the U.S. and you're no longer a resident of any state that may have a tax, let's say California, and you may be looking at withdrawing money from a 401k that would be taxable. If you can wait until you arrive Mexico and you started your residence in Mexico to make that withdrawal, the withdrawal would not be subject to state tax.
Well, that's great.
That in itself can save you thousands of dollars.
Sure, especially in a lot of states that have very, very high taxes.
Correct.
And there are a few that don't. Hawaii has not too high of taxes, Nevada, but places like California, New York, New Jersey, on and on and on, that can add up to be a lot of money if you're bringing stuff down here.
A lot of money, yes.
Let's see. What have I not touched on that you want to get out to the expat community?
Well, there's one thing that many people come down and they look at the investments that are available in Mexico. And as you may know, the interest rates here are far higher than they are in the US, and it presents a real investment opportunity for many people. The problem is they also want to invest in mutual funds in Mexico. And because those are considered private foreign investment corporations, it presents a problem because that mutual fund reports their earnings and your earnings according to Mexican law or according to the country where they're established. That may or may not be the same as US law.
Okay.
And so it leaves you in a position where you cannot correctly report the income from that mutual fund. So I really encourage anyone who's coming down and doing investments in this area to stay invested in only interest-bearing accounts. And if they really want to invest in stocks, do it directly with a company. In other words, you buy shares of a company rather than investing in mutual funds.
I've heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, that once you invest in something down here that it's recorded forever in both countries. Is that true? Say I invest in my bank, they have a savings account type thing, and I put, they say they'll give you 9% if you put $20,000 in it, or 50,000, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then, but once you do that, that you're always on record of having invested in a foreign country. That may be a misnomer that I've been told by someone.
I wouldn't say that the IRS never keeps that information, but there's no negative ramifications for investing in Mexico.
Okay. How about real estate? A lot of expats come down here and they buy a property and they live there a while, and then they decide, hey, they want bigger or smaller, mm-hmm. and so they buy that. But then they also keep their other property as a rental property.
Correct.
Now, that's considered income, mm-hmm. and they have to file forms.
Correct.
To state that they have that income and probably pay, is it Mexican taxes on that?
So yes, many people pay Mexican taxes on that. Some people work like the local people and they don't declare those incomes. But as a U.S. citizen, you're required to report your worldwide income, and that would include any rentals. It would include rentals in Mexico or rentals in the U.S. The only difference in the reporting requirements when it comes to a rental property is that it's a different depreciation system. And so a residential property in the U.S. is depreciated over 27 and a half years. A foreign property is depreciated over 30 years. So there are some minor differences, but basically the bookkeeping is all the same.
If you're an American or Canadian, you're working part-time or full-time still. A lot of, the internet has allowed a lot of people to move and
Yes.
work on the internet all day long, and they still get, their compensation from the United States or their company they're working for, but they're in Mexico. They don't have to file both countries. They're just working for a American company, and they're being paid by the American company. They don't need to claim that as income in Mexico, the country of, do they? And file a tax form here?
So what I can say is that Mexico is not actively looking for those people.
Okay.
As long as the payroll is in the U.S., Mexico is not looking for those people to start paying taxes in Mexico. But there's a huge advantage when you are working abroad, even for a U.S. company. If it's earned income, wages, or self-employment, you can actually exclude up to $120,000 of that from U.S. taxation. And so basically a person who's working in Mexico and maybe earning $120,000 from the U.S. is going to pay about $14,000 less in taxes than that same person doing the same job but physically present in the United States.
For some reason, I think that's a very important piece of information, because a lot of people are going to like that now that they know about it.
Is the what they call digital nomads today. And yes, as people find that out, and many people have come to Mexico during the COVID pandemic, and once they found out the tax advantage of working down here, have decided it's too expensive to go back to the U.S.
Pretty smart.
Yes, it's an excellent tax strategy for people who can do that. Yes.
Okay, what else?
One thing I wanted to mention, because a lot of people are under the misconception that they need to pay, or that they need to continue paying state taxes, because accountants in the U.S. don't have the concept that you can actually be a resident of no state. So let me just give you if you're coming from California, you move to Mexico, you establish residence here, then you're a resident of a resident of Mexico. That's no different than being a resident of Texas, where there's no state income tax. So you're not paying tax here in Mexico, and you're not required to pay tax in the state that you came from after you become a non-resident. You can still vote in that state because your voting address is based on the last physical residence that you had while you lived there in the U.S. But you can file a part-year resident tax return to close the year that you moved down. And then in the future, you probably don't need to file a tax return unless you have a property that generates income in the U.S., such as a rental property.
Okay.
If you had a rental property in, say, New York, then you would file a non-resident tax return, but you may be responsible for paying some tax on the rental because it's sourced in that state.
How many states? We have the 50 states. I heard a couple girls on The View say we have 52 states, but I think they're kind of misspoke. We do have District of Columbia, and then there are a couple of providences, they call it, maybe like Costa Rica, Puerto Rico. I'm not sure exactly because I've never lived in either one of those places. But how many of the 50 states and District of Columbia are tax-free like Texas?
I can't name all of them off the top of my head, but I know that Nevada, Texas, Tennessee, I believe Vermont, and Florida are the primary states.
But most of them do have a state
and Washington
tax.
State. None of those states have a state income tax.
And some of the state income tax are pretty high.
Yes, incredibly high.
8, 10, 12%. Am I being modest? Or
Depending on your income and the level of income, yes, you can pay 8, 12% or more to a state.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of
And I
money.
guess why I lived in Texas for a while.
That's, and you have the same advantage living in Mexico. You're not paying a state tax.
Okay. What else?
Let's go back to the situation where if you marry a spouse who is Mexican, then you have the right to treat that person who who is not a U.S. citizen, who is not a legal resident of the U.S., who has no ties to the U.S. at all. But you as a citizen of the U.S. have a right to treat your spouse as if he or she was a U.S. resident for tax purposes. And that means that you can file a joint tax return, and you would put the income from both spouses. Many times, since the wages are much lower in Mexico, a Mexican spouse that works will have a lower income and will also have paid foreign taxes, which can be applied to the U.S. taxes. So in most cases, in all of the cases I have seen, it's better for a person to file jointly with his or her non-resident alien spouse. That's the IRS name for that person. But it's better for them to file jointly.
Okay.
And so what they need to do to be able to file jointly is, as Michael said, they need to get an ITIN number, and you can apply for that directly with the IRS, which requires you to send in original documents to the IRS and hope that they return them. or you can come to a certified acceptance agent such as myself or someone else. We can certify those documents and send copies along with the application for I-10. That I-10 number would be good for 5 years, and at the end of 5 years, then it can be renewed. It can be constantly renewed, but the renewal is every 5 years.
Now, does that matter if you get married in the United States and or Mexico? We were married in Mexico.
Yes.
But, you know, a man or a woman may have their companion and go to Las Vegas and get married there one weekend. And then, but, you know, they both are living in Mexico.
That's right.
Does that matter? Or is it only for people that are living in the United States or only people that are living in Mexico?
It's people for living anywhere. And in fact, I have some clients who the spouse, one spouse lives or works in the U.S. and the other spouse is in Mexico. And so they don't even live in the same country, and yet they're able to declare married filing jointly.
That's great. Great information, because that's just more money in your pocket and less in the federal government's.
It's more money in your pocket, and in case you decide to do some immigration work to make your spouse a resident, or excuse me, to get your spouse a green card in the future, or you want to get your spouse citizenship in the U.S., then filing that joint tax return actually helps you on the legal side.
Now that is something immigration wise. You have to go through the immigration office and everything. Say I wanted to get my wife permission to get a green card. That means she can work in the United States. But I've also been told that as a spouse, and we've been filing joint income since 2005, that when she turns 62 or 65, that she can also apply for Social Security benefits?
Yes.
Is that something that is true?
It is true. And if it is true in two regards. If you were to, if you're married to the spouse when the spouse turns 62, they can receive half of their husband's pension. That doesn't matter if it's a Mexican spouse or a U.S. spouse.
Okay.
And the same thing comes into benefits in case a spouse passes away. Your spouse will be able to receive benefits, your Social Security benefits, as a survivor. However, if the spouse is Mexican and does not have a green card or does not have residency, then the spouse has to go to the U.S. 1 month out of every 6 months in order to receive Social Security benefits. That's easy to do when you're in your 60s, but when you get into your 80s, it's not so easy to do. And so for people who are getting older, for people who have a non-resident alien spouse, I highly recommend that they do the paperwork to get their spouse residency so that they can get their full Social Security benefit and that they don't have that obligation to go to the U.S. every 6 months and spend an entire 30 days.
Now, is that one of the services you all provide, or is that through an immigration specialist, an attorney? I mean, where do you go for information like that or to get that done?
We have some attorneys that come into our office and they will be glad to help you, but any immigration attorney can help you with that.
Okay. Is there quite a bit of cost involved in that?
That I don't know. I don't know the cost. I do know that the attorneys that come into our office will disclose the cost of their service, and they will also disclose the cost that has to be paid to the U.S. government for the application.
All right. Move on to the next point. We've got them all down right here, and we're going down the list so we make sure we don't forget everything or anything.
That's true. You know, when people move to Mexico, they're so excited to have a foreign address, and they love to share their foreign address with their friends and family, and tell them that they can receive mail at this address now that they're living abroad. I was the same way when I moved abroad. I loved my address and gave it to everyone, but the IRS does not want to know where you live. The IRS wants to know where you can receive a letter. And with the Mexican mail system being less than ideal, it is always a good idea to maintain a mailing address either in the US, in Canada. I even have some clients that live here in Mexico that have mailing addresses in Europe because that's where a person is that can receive their mail. So it's very important that on the front of your tax return, you put the address where you can receive a letter.
And that doesn't mean you have to own a home. It could be a relative,
Can be
a
yes.
child, a brother, sister, a good friend, if you trust that good friend quite a bit.
Yes, it can be anyone. It just needs to be someone who is responsible and would notify you in case of that letter.
Now, that's not true with Social Security, correct? Because Social Security wants to know, I get a form every 6 months, and they want to know if there's been any changes
Yes.
in address, in marital situation, and there's one or two other questions. But
So Medicare does require a U.S. address because part of the Medicare program is it's both a state and a federal program. So they have to put you in some state, somewhere. So everyone needs to provide a physical address, and it should be a residential address in the U.S. for Medicare. But that doesn't mean that your mail for Medicare has to go to that location.
Okay.
You can send your mail to any location, to Mexico, to a P.O. box, to a friend somewhere else, wherever you can receive that information. However, if you're living abroad and your Social Security has that information as you living outside the country, it's actually every 2 years. It only seems like every 6 months, but it's actually every 2 years that they send a form, and you're required to answer certain questions on this form, sign it, and physically send this back. Mm-hmm. If you don't do that, they will stop your Social Security benefits until they receive that form.
well, there's a service down here called Lake Chapala Mules, and a lot of us going back and forth will take letters or small packages or that with us when we're going to the States and mail them for people. And I've had people mail letters for me, and I've actually mailed letters for other people because Patrick was being very kind to the Mexican Postal Service when he said it's not the best in the world. It probably ranks in the top one of the worst in the world. I've actually, 2 years ago, I was in San Diego, and I mailed myself 4 different letters. Never got a one of them. And I put international postage on it, and never got one to my address.
Right.
The only letters I ever get are from the federal government of the United States. Social Security, IRS, and, well, I think that's about it. But for some reason, the Mexican Postal Service treats those as very high priority
Right.
letters. And if you mail yourself a letter, if your cousin mails you a letter or something, good luck, because I've never gotten anything except one or two from the United States government. And I did get a notice that I had a niece that had a child. When the child was about 1.5 years old, I got the birth notice. So it's about a
Okay.
year and a half later, believe it or not. So
Sometimes it comes, but very late.
it finally showed up.
It sure does.
What else have we need to get on that, like I mentioned earlier, the preparation for the end of the year?
Yes. The problem down here is people have difficulty receiving their mail. It's always an issue. People always come in to do their taxes late. When you're living abroad, you have an automatic extension until June the 15th. That's for people who are living abroad, but
That's 2 months.
that's 2 months.
That's very important information.
While your payment date is still still April 15th, if you have to pay and you pay by June 15th, you only pay interest and no penalties. So that's something, but look at it this way. If the IRS knows that by living abroad you need more time, then there's no shame in filing an extension that would take you all the way up until October 15th. And so I have so many people come into the office, they're very nervous, they're very upset because they don't have their papers and they're not going to be able to file on time or before April 15th. So my advice to everyone living abroad is relax. Take advantage of that automatic 2-month extension. And for clients that we have already filed a 6-month extension before April 15th. We file extensions for anyone free of charge so that you have that additional time to get your paperwork. But before the end of the year, what you should be doing is making sure that all of your brokerage accounts, all of your bank accounts, Social Security, anyone who's going to send you a tax statement has the correct address. because now that you're living abroad and you may not be receiving mail on a daily basis, people forget where that mail is going to. So it's always a good idea to review that before the end of the year, so that the statements that will go out in January and February will go to the correct address.
Okay, because I know my 401k, my financial people in the United States, they do mail one, or you can opt out and just get it electronically.
Correct.
And that's what I do every year. Is just,
Yes.
And it seems you get the information a lot faster.
You do, and even if you get a paper statement and there's a person who's receiving that for you, have them to take a picture of that statement, because unless it's a brokerage statement where there may be 12 or 14 pages, generally that picture suffices to do the tax return.
Oh, really?
Sure.
That's
sure.
great.
We don't need originals.
Well, my brother did that for me once or twice. Now, he never put it straight. I always had to turn it and adjust it and all this. And I think one time he even had it upside down.
Upside down, it happens.
But you know, JP, that's no note out to you if you ever watch his show. Be sure you put it and take the picture right, okay?
And a clear picture. We need
A
to
clear
read it.
one, yeah, it has
Yeah.
to be. It can't be, at this kind of angle. One thing that Patrick did for me, and I think he can do for anybody, was I have Social Security, and that's the only real income that I do get anymore since I'm retired. And I asked him one time, I said, how much money can I take out of my 401k per year without having to pay any taxes? Because I paid taxes for so many years, I don't want to have to keep giving them when I don't get really any of the benefits of the infrastructure of the United States, or, the military and all of this stuff, because I live down here full time.
That's right.
And he was able to give me a number saying, Michael, here's what you get per year from Social Security, and you're allowed to take out this much to a certain figure to where I don't have to pay taxes on it.
Correct.
Which I was happy about that.
Right.
And I don't have any foreseeable needs of a large chunk of money. And so it's you can work with people and tell them, hey, if you take out this certain amount, you won't have to pay any taxes.
Yes.
Or very, very little amount except on what you're already up to, because there's certain limits.
Right. And I remind people that I can't help you after the fact. I need you to come to me before. It may be at the end of the year. And again, this is an end of the year thing. If you're thinking about selling stocks, if you're thinking about what may happen, come to me in December and we'll do some tax planning so that you know what's coming up, and so that there's still time to make certain adjustments before filing your tax return. And yes, there are many opportunities anytime that you can take money out of a 401k without paying taxes. You should do it, and up to the maximum amount. It doesn't mean you're going to spend the money. It means you're simply going to put the money outside of your 401k so that you do have access to that money in the future. So many times I see people that, for maybe self-control reasons, I don't know, they want to leave that money in, and then something happens and all of a sudden they need to get $30,000 out of an IRA. They could have taken that money out over a period of 2 or 3 years and paid zero tax, but now they're being taxed on it.
Well, and one thing that Patrick pointed out to me, which was a great idea, I was in need for a new car. And he said, well, the new car, if you take all the money out of your 401k now, you'll have to pay taxes on some of it. So we kind of waited. I took some out in December, waited till January of the next year, took some money out there, and that gave me 2 withdrawals, and that gave me enough money to buy the car, but yet I didn't have to pay taxes on either year because I hadn't taken hardly anything out in December for the previous year. And then the next year, it did limit to me on how much more I could take out during that year, but fortunately I didn't have to take anything out. And so I saved money paying taxes.
Exactly.
And I got the car, it was just a month later.
That's
So
right.
that was a great tip.
We're not avoiding taxes. We're just paying the
We're doing
minimum.
it smart, right?
We are taking advantage of strategies, legal strategies, to reduce your tax burden.
Well, I've mentioned several things that Patrick has done for me and my spouse that have helped very, very much. But I had to contact him. I had to find out where he was, and that's what I want him to do right now. I think he can help so many people, and especially the people that are watching the show and your friends. Patrick, would you please give your contact information, where you're located, what your phone number is, email account, how they can generate contact with you and start this process?
Okay, so there are several ways to contact us. You can go to our website at lakesidetaxservice.com. There is a form there that you can fill out so that we get back in touch with you. You can also call us at 376-766-3557. That's our telephone number. We have a U.S. number, which is 956-765-2155. Our email is info@lakesidetaxservice.com. And we're located in San Antonio, Tlayacapan, which, if you're familiar with this area, is between Chapala and Ajijic. We're conveniently located about a block off of the main highway, and the address is Privada Ramon Corona, number 38, San Antonio, Tlayacapan.
You go to the Sunrise Restaurant, you go down the hill about a block, you turn right a block, and come back about half a block.
That's
It's right there.
From Sunrise down.
Everybody knows where Sunrise is because it's a great place.
It's very easy to find us.
They,
And our, let me do mention though,
Sure.
that our hours of telephone service are from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. Monday through Thursday. We are there all day long, but those are the hours that we consistently answer the telephone.
and I've always had very good service. If Patrick's not there, it's not like some other places where you call and say, have him call me back or email me back, and you never hear. And after the 20th call, you finally go down there and find him. I've had that with a lot of different services here. Oh, I'm going to be there tomorrow, and 2 weeks later they show up. They really do a great job at getting back with you with either just a phone call or an email or something saying, hey, Patrick's out of town, or our paperwork isn't done yet, give us another couple of days. So I do have to highly brag that you all do a great
you.
service in that aspect. So that's fabulous.
I
Well, we got a
appreciate it.
couple minutes left. What haven't we talked on or touched on that you want to express to everybody that's very important?
Let's go over identity protection, because this is something that happens to a lot of people. It's a very good program from the IRS, but they're trying to reduce the number of fraudulent tax returns that are filed. So anytime something changes on your tax return, such as you change your mailing address or you change your marital status or something, it's highly likely that you will be sent through the identity verification process. In order to get through that process, you must be able to receive a letter, because this letter has a control number that's required. So here again, we go back to the address. It's very important that you be able to get mail from the IRS. If you get this letter, all you need to do is call and answer the questions and let the person there guide you through what they want you to answer. Because basically they're looking for information from a prior tax return to verify that you are the same person who filed the prior tax return, just to reduce fraud. If for some reason you answer incorrectly or you can't get through that process on the phone and they tell you that you have to go into an IRS office, call us, because we know the way to get through this by sending the paperwork. So you do not have to go back to the US to go through to an IRS office. You can come to us, we'll tell you what we need. We make up a pack of papers, we send that, and generally within about 8 weeks, they'll take you out of the identity verification process. Meanwhile, that will hold up any refund that you have coming. So,
Okay. And the best way, just general knowledge, if you're going to get a refund, you know you are, is just have it deposited into your account. I think they do most of that. They don't send many checks out anymore, because that can be somebody steal your mail and this, that, and the other. So the best way is just to have it deposited into a checking or some type of account in the United States, correct?
that's correct. And the IRS will only deposit to US accounts. It can be a savings or a checking. The IRS will only deposit to a US account. We'd mentioned Social Security before. Social Security will deposit to foreign accounts. And so those people who are living here who may want to get Social Security benefits in pesos, that can be done.
Is that a good idea to do that?
It depends on where you're spending your money.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've had couples that they split their Social Security benefits so that one would have their benefit deposited in the US and the other in Mexico, so that they always have dollars and pesos.
I think I just need to have my whole return sent to Costco, because That's where most of my money goes down
Really?
here. What else? We have one more minute. Anything that I haven't touched on that's really, really important?
No, but when you go to your tax preparer in the U.S., if you are the only client that has foreign issues, many times your tax preparer may be excellent, but if you're the only client that they have who has foreign issues, it's not worth his or her time to go in and review the law to prepare one tax return. So many times tax preparers in the U.S., once you have a foreign issue, they'll tell you, no, you need to seek someone who has more experience in that.
And you're the guy.
And I'm the guy.
Perfect. Patrick, I'm going to say thank you very much for all your time, for the information you gave. I'm sure people are going to have a lot of questions after they watch this show. Don't hesitate to contact Patrick. He'll be able to answer your questions because all of us have a very specific need.
Correct.
And all our information is different and all of our needs are different. So don't try and figure it out on yourself because it's hard. Go to an expert like Patrick. Let him walk you through the process and make sure it's done right because none of us want to be in trouble with the tax system like Al Capone was.
No, we don't.
So Patrick, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Michael.
And contact him, contact their services and let them help you. It makes your life so much easier and less stressful. And once you're retired, that's what it's all about, just relaxing, enjoying daily life and
That's
things
right.
like that. So thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
we appreciate your time and your information. And don't hesitate to contact Patrick because they can help you out a lot. I want to say thank you very much for tuning in today and watching this episode of Expat Conversations with Michael Nolen. Please tell your friends, your loved ones, anybody that you know is thinking about coming down here for vacation or moving down here permanently to watch some of the shows. I think through the university they've provided us a vehicle to really get out a lot of great information, and especially with great guests like Patrick. It helps me learn a lot, but I'm thinking it can help everybody that wanted to come down. So thank you very much for tuning in today and enjoy the rest of your week.
Until